Hello, I'm back. I hope that everybody had a lovely Thanksgiving. I'd like to start this off by adding something to the last video, to Vilya, because as soon as that was posted, a very good friend of mine from the Bay Area contacted me and said, hey, so did your mother ever talk to this Canadian soldier ever again? And I guess that I should have included that. No, she did not talk to him. However, after I brought my mother over, which of course by that time, that was like a good 16 years after we saw him the last time, my mother had kept his address in Canada. And a year after I brought her over, she said, oh yeah, maybe, we should find out. So I wrote a letter to him, and it took a little while, but we got an answer. And it was just very, very kind and very sweet from his sister, who said that no, unfortunately, he had died about a year before, but that he never got married. And whenever people tried to fix him up with somebody, or they said, why don't you date somebody? He would say, no, I can't do that. I'm in love with a woman in Europe, and it's this Hungarian lady, and she has this incredibly cute little daughter. And I left my heart there, and I really could not have a relationship with anybody else. And I just thought that was so kind that she told us about that. But so that, and George, if you're listening to this now, yes, you were right. I should have included that. So I'm including it now. And now to today's story. And this one is called Rosemary. Rosemary, if you pronounce this in German, it would be Rosemarie. And on that little lane where we were put into that cottage by the government, across from that little lane, there was, of course, another garden plot. And those people had not lost their home. They had a house in what was called the Neustadt, which was a part of Bremen that really didn't get bombed. So they had a house there, but they also had this garden. And Mrs. Ostermann was a rather stern German lady, and she had this little girl that was exactly my age, and Rosemary always referred to me as her big sister, which was hilarious because yes, I was a lot bigger than her, more like this, and Rosemary was very tiny, very frail. I thought she was beautiful. She had these huge blue eyes. So my nickname for her was Blaumeise. And Blaumeise is a beautiful, very fragile little finch that has a blue chest. And Rosemary always reminded me of a very frail little bird. I had once found a bird that had fallen out of a nest, and it was just very frail. It had a broken wing. And this is always how I thought of her, because she was so frail and so tiny, had beautiful long hair. Her mother always braided her hair with little bows, and I adored her. I saw her very rarely because the family Ostermann did not come very often, and she was sort of an afterthought, you might say, because Ostermanns had 3 older boys, and they were all like between 16 and 20. And then there was this little girl, and I don't think, and this is just conjecture on my part, but it's just based on how she treated Rosemary, that was really not anything she had counted on, and she really was too old to have a little girl. She was not very nice. She would pull her over and say, oh, just stop it. And my mother would just look at me and roll her eyes up in her head, because she certainly didn't treat me like that. But when Rosemary came, we were always overjoyed, and the 2 of us were always allowed to go down to this little beach at the River Weser, and we would play there. And I was the queen of sandcastles. We would build sandcastles that were as tall as we were. I said, no, it needs to be bigger, it needs to be bigger. And then we'd put something on the top, and we'd do these roads going around it, and we'd make little windows, and we'd find flowers and sticks and rocks, and people would actually stop and say, oh my God, who did this? And then Rosemary would say, oh, my big sister did that. She always referred to me as her big sister. And I actually should find a photo. I have one photo of Rosemary and I where we're sitting in in the front row of our class picture when we were in the first grade, because we actually went to the same school. And I'm sitting there like, and I'm super happy. I feel, oh my, I'm a big girl now. I'm in school and this is so fun. And Rosemary is next to me and she's like, I know she wasn't beaten, but she always sort of came across as being beaten and maybe not really liked. Anyway, Rosemary and I just always had a wonderful time. So this one time, she said to me, you know what, I'm really afraid that my new shoes are gonna get ruined when we're down there by the river with the sand and the water. I think I should take them and hide them somewhere. And I said, oh, well, okay, you know, if you think. So she found some spot where the sand and the rocks were sort of going back up and she hid her shoes there. And of course then, you know, hours later, finally the sandcastle is finished and I would make a moat around it. And then I said, come on, we gotta find stuff for the bridge now. And we have to make a gate here because you're the only one that's allowed in my castle because it's my castle. And then we put a big A out of little rocks and a little R. I mean, it was really fun. We always had the most wonderful time. But now we're done. And Rosemary said, you know what? I think it's about time to go home. I said, yeah, you're probably right. It's sort of getting dark. And so I'm calling, Vilja, come on, we're going back home. And of course, Vilja was always with us when we were down there. And all of a sudden she says to me, oh my God, I don't know where I put the shoes. Did you see where I put them? And I said, well, no, I was gathering branches and twigs and rocks. I said, I really didn't look. And she said, oh my God, my mother's gonna kill me. I've got to find these shoes. We looked absolutely everywhere. At every little pile where we thought, oh, there might be something under there. No, nothing. And then finally, we could hear her mother yelling from, I mean, it was only like 100 feet away down the hill. Rosemarie, du musst jetzt reinkommen, which means, Rosemary, you need to come in now. And Rosemary said, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. You just have no idea how my mother can be. And I said, well, I don't know, I think I do. She's not like my mother. Okay, so she goes home, I go home. Here we go. The next morning, this was a weekend, the next morning, very early, bang, 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 bang. Somebody's banging on our little door. And I thought, well, this is really weird. So my mother went to the door. And there's Rosemary's mother, and she said, you are going to have to give me the money for Rosemary's shoes. My mother said, what are you talking about? And she said, those two were playing yesterday, and your daughter took my daughter's shoes and put them somewhere so they wouldn't get wet. And then your stupid little girl didn't know where she put them. And now Rosemary came home without the shoes. My mother turned to me and she said, Aranka, that tone of voice was usually, oh boy, maybe I'm in trouble. Did you do that? And I said, no, Mama, I didn't. Those two got into a verbal fight. Ostermann kept saying, I know my daughter, and my mother stayed very calm and she said, well, I know my daughter too. And if she tells me that she did not do that, she didn't. And I trust her. And Ostermann got very nasty. She said, well, then you're more stupid than I thought you were. I can't believe this. And my mother said, I am not going to fight with you. I know my little girl. Are you calling me a liar? And my mother said, no. What I'm trying to tell you is that I think your little girl is so afraid of you that she will not tell you the truth. My little girl is not afraid of me. If she did it, she would admit to it. Well, we'll see about that. We want our money. And she took off. She walked across the little lane. And the next morning, I saw Rosemary, and she said, I am so sorry, but I couldn't tell my mother the truth. You just have no idea how nasty she can get. She would just beat the crap out of me. And then she lifted up her shirt and she said, see this? This is where she hit me a week ago, and it was still like blue and green. And I said, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. And she said, but you're my best friend. And I lied. And I said, it's okay. And I gave her a hug. And she said, you really are my big sister. I said, yes, I am. And she said to me, you know what? I don't know what's wrong with my mother. I don't really think she likes me. I've said to her, often when we come, there are pears and apples that fell off the trees, and I will try to get them to bring them over to you. And she says, no, don't take them to those people. We need it. And she said, I don't understand that. We have fruit that's rotting, just like where you are. And though the people where we were, they had about 3 feet around this little cottage. They had put up a wire fence with barbed wire on the top so that we could not go in the garden to pick up the fruit that had fallen down. And it was rotting. You know, you could smell it. But they didn't want us to have any of it. So Ostermans were doing the same thing. Well, it's very interesting about this story that Rosemary never told her mother what really had happened. A year or so later, there was another incident. By that time, my father had shown up, and he walked over. Then we already had built a little cottage down the road. He walked over to Ostermans and he said, look, just so that you understand, whatever happened with those shoes, you people are still pissed off about that. You're going to have to get over it, because my little girl did not do that. My wife told you, and I'm telling you now, you obviously do not have a good relationship with your children. And they got into a big verbal fight. My mother said, come on, forget it, you know, come back home. The upshot of this was that Rosemary told her mother, after I emigrated to the United States, I mean, now think I'm 18, and 2 or 3 years later, before I brought my mother over, she ran into Rosemary and she said, oh, I just wanted to tell you something. I feel so bad about the fact that I was not honest when we were little, because Aranka didn't do that. And my mother said, yeah, I know her. And when she said she didn't do it, I trusted her. And Rosemary said, well, you just don't know what my mother was like. I was terrified of her. But she said, you know what? I'm going to tell her now, because she really needs to know that. And over the years, I've tried to find her, but women of my age in Europe back then, when they got married, they would change their last names to their husband's name. So I don't know, Rosemary, for all I know, could still be living in Bremen. And I'd love to hear what she's done or how she is, but there is nobody named Rosemarie Ostermann, and that was her name when she was a little girl. So I could never find her. But anyway, she was my very first friend, and I loved her dearly. And I hope that you like my story. And if you like it, tell your friends and subscribe to my channel, or let me know that you like it. And thank you very much. I'll see you soon.